Episode 12 with Terry Eidson. Hey, hi and hello. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Barnraisers. If you're new here, then you might be well asking, what have you walked into? First of all, I'm your host. My name's Dan Stones and I'm a team dynamics specialist. Each fortnight I bring you a long-form, deep-dive conversation with someone who has a unique insight, story or outlook on people, teams and culture. Where do these people come from? The answer is all over the planet and from all walks of life. We talk to researchers, authors, corporate executives, kidnapping negotiators, Formula One identities, artists, actors, and even game designers. Now, what possibly could all these people have in common? Well, let me tell you, they are all part of a distinct group of people that I like to refer to as the world's ultimate team players. So if you want to know how teams really work and what it takes to create, build, and live in a team-first world, then you're in the right place. Welcome or welcome back to another episode of Barnraisers. The show starts
now.
Today's guest is Terry Eidson. Terry is an educator, teacher, and coach of both football and golf at De La Salle High School in Concord, California. From the outside, De La Salle looks like any other Catholic boys' high school. It enrolls just over 1,000 students. Its school colours are green and silver. The motto is Homme de Foi, or Men of Faith. The school runs the usual curriculum. They have religious studies, a strong visual arts and music program, and they run athletics programs for all the major sports. But coursing through the halls, theatres and locker rooms of this school is something entirely unaverage. Something that every other school, business or community would love to have. And that something is one of the strongest team cultures that I have ever encountered. And perhaps nowhere is it more apparent than in their varsity football program. You may have heard of the Spartans. There's been a number of books, documentaries and even a major movie has been made about them. And what's the reason for all of this exposure? Well, for 14 seasons, the De La Salle Spartans football team was undefeated. Yes, you heard that right. Between 1992 and 2004, the Spartans football program managed to rattle off a staggering 151 consecutive victories and prove to themselves and the world that culture trumps personnel every day of the week. I love the Spartan story. Not just for the brilliance of the achievement, the skill, commitment and determination that it took from the athletes and coaches involved, but I love it for the incredible culture that the teams have all accepted, owned, displayed and passed on over the years. To give you a taste of what this culture sounds like, I want to read to you a passage from one of the books devoted to the team and share a quote from their head coach, Bob Ladouceur. Coach Ladd, as he's known, wrote a document called What is a Spartan? I'll include a link to this document on the show notes. We measure our success by how well we've embraced the spirit and essence of those intangibles. And I'll share a few of them with you. First off, there are many student athletes who have fought, sacrificed, achieved and won at De La Salle the past 20 years. They have set the groundwork or foundation for the tradition. The first thought of tradition, or the word tradition, seems to have a negative connotation in today's rapidly changing world. The word itself conjures up the thought of being old-fashioned, backward, and even stubborn in the face of truth. And for some traditions, I would suppose that's true. Please don't be misled. Our tradition is not the colour of or how we wear our uniforms. It's not what we eat at a pre-game meal. It's not the plays we run, and to a large degree it's not how many wins we have accumulated. The wins are just a byproduct of what our tradition actually consists of. These are just the trappings of a tradition. Shallow, hollow. In fact, this has nothing to do with tradition at all. Those who believe that this is tradition will eventually realize that they didn't belong to or experience tradition. Our tradition begins with a commitment. There is a qualitative value that we place on that word, commitment. If I had to choose just one lesson a student would learn from participating, it would be learning how to make a commitment. If they say yes to participating, then they must understand that they have said yes to entering into a relationship with me and everyone involved with the program. And with that comes enormous responsibility. Essentially, it means that I'm going to expect the best from you, and you can expect the best from me. It isn't enough to say, I'll show up. We may say we are committed to many things in life, but to what degree? The key is for us to infuse commitment into everything we stand for and what we do. Coach Laddiser led the Spartans as head coach from 1979 and only retired after the 2012 season. During this time, Coach Ladd's right-hand man and assistant coach of the Spartans for all but 2 of these years was none other than my guest today, Terry Eidson. Terry took over in 1992 as the team's defensive coordinator and still holds this position, along with special teams coach, to this very day. Terry's been an integral piece of the Spartan puzzle for the past 36 years. To give you some context, and it's not something that we spoke about, and I'm not sure that Terry ever would, but the team's record since he took over as defensive coordinator in 1992 is 323 wins, 16 losses, and 2 draws. That's a winning percentage of 95%. And when you see those sort of figures and those sort of results, it's worth looking into. Now, in this conversation, you're not going to hear too much about the streak or the win-loss records over the years. Instead, we focus on how has a school like De La Salle managed to build such a formidable culture, one that's loved and pushed by the students, teachers, coaches, and parents alike. We talk about some of the team rituals the football team has in place, the standards that apply to everyone who wears those school colours, and the role that vulnerability plays in creating the brotherhood. That's the term the players use to describe the culture and mindset of the team. Now, a couple of things to note before we kick off. First of all, Terry is a super busy guy, and the team was preparing to play for one of the biggest games of the year when I caught up with him. So for the time that Terry did give me, and it's probably a little bit shorter than usual, I am very, very grateful. Secondly, Terry's not a tech guy. It's fair to say that we had some fun initially setting up for this call, and Terry was actually using a borrowed laptop because it had Skype installed. As a result, the sound quality can get a little rough in places, and the whole thing was recorded in the coaches' lounge at the school. So throughout the course of this interview, you're going to hear coaches filing in and out of the room and some background conversations going on at the same time. We've tried to clean that up as best as possible, but there's probably a bit more noise than usual going on in the background. If it helps, just picture yourself sitting in a locker room after a practice session and imagine coaches walking in and out of the room talking about different things. So let's not delay any further. It's my pleasure, privilege and honour to introduce De La Salle Defensive Coordinator and Special Teams Coach, Mr. Terry Eidson. What your current role is at De La Salle these days. I'll cover it in the introduction, but you've been at De La now since 1981, is that correct?
Right, this is my 36th year, right. I'm a religious studies teacher, still assistant on the varsity football team. I'm the defensive coordinator and charge of special teams, and as the school goes, I'm also the head golf coach as well in the spring.
And tell me, Terry, just for the people that don't know, you maybe aren't familiar with the De La Salle story, and I'm not going to talk about the Spartans and the streak a lot, but just for people that don't know you, just a bit of background, how do you think your fellow coaches would describe you and maybe your coaching style?
I would say energetic. I'm probably the loudest coach on the staff for sure. I would say probably I have the best sense of humor on the staff as well, but most of the coaches are pretty even keel, but that's not my personality. So I am definitely, although if you came to one of our practices, it's, I think people have a stereotypical view of football coaches as yelling all the time and, going crazy and stuff. And that just really isn't our practice. So if the volume does go up once in a while, it'd probably be from me, but it's not a real common thing around our practices. We're just constantly teaching, working with the kids. And I would say that, all the coaches were pretty serious about our jobs and take them pretty seriously, but we like to have a lot of fun too. So I think the kids, even though they go through a lot of intensity with myself and the other coaches, I think they'd say, practice, we have a lot, we still joke around, have sense of humor. It's just not all business out there. After all, they're high school kids, and you can't have a successful program unless you have some fun in there as well.
Couldn't agree more. And just for the people that are listening that are new or maybe in places that don't understand the people we're talking about, high school kids, the age we're talking about is what? We're talking mid-teens up to 18 or?
Yeah, basically, at least in the United States, a freshman is generally between 14 and 15 years old, and it goes through their senior year, which generally they're 17 or 18. So at our level, we have mostly juniors and seniors, mostly 16, 17-year-olds, a few 18-year-olds, and a couple of sophomores, so a couple of 15-year-olds sprinkled in there. And
how is the season shaping up so far? I mean, I've looked at the results, but how are you summing it up so far?
So far, yeah, we got our last game of the season before the playoffs is in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. We're 8-1 right now. The team we're playing is undefeated. We've already qualified for the playoffs. Now we're at least in California, it's a little different. It's a playoff system, but it's kind of like a Northern California playoff, and then you eventually play the Southern California winner. So we're not all together until the end. This game next week is going to go a long ways to determine if we get into what we consider the best division. It's called the Open Division, or if we don't win, then we'll probably be put in a lower division for the playoffs, for state playoffs.
Okay, so a big couple of weeks coming up in terms of preparation, yeah. I would imagine.
Right. Well, next week is the big one, and then to get in, then once you're in the playoffs, once you lose, then you're out. So
the pointy end of the season for sure.
Believe it or not, it's kind of screwy. Our last game would be December 15th. Here it is. What is it, like October 23rd? And we only have possible 4 games left, or 4 games left that will go all the way up to December 15th.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's really kind of messed up. We got a lot of buys in between. Yeah, it's kind of hard. It's kind of tough on the kids and the coaches to go that long for only 4 games, but that's what we have. So
yeah, I'd imagine that'd be really tricky. I mean, I look at coaching a lot of times in terms of what I do as being managing expectations. And with those gaps and things that you're talking about there, I mean, managing the expectations and what's going through the kids' minds must be really hard. Before the season, we talk about expectations, but we don't necessarily talk about, I'm going to set expectations. We call them setting standards. And right. There's a great quote that I've found that was by Charles Kettering, who's a famous inventor from America, head of research at GM for almost 30 years, the motor company. And he said, high achievement always takes place in the framework of high expectation. I'd imagine those expectations are probably some of the highest you could imagine when you walk into the building or in the program as someone new on the team.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There has been a history and a tradition to the program that I think any student that when he first walks on campus here, and if he wants to play football, he knows he's got big shoes to fill. And I mean, it's not only a locally known program, but it's probably, I would have to say, a nationally known program as well. So there is, I think, you mentioned the winning streak, and it's, being undefeated. Now, I don't think there's an expectation in our school and in our program about, winning all the time, but there is an expectation about accountability, responsibility, and especially effort. That's really big for us, and and getting the most out of your abilities. That's a high expectation that to try to instill in a teenage boy it can be difficult, and it's a process, but it's one that the coaches and the kids seem to be willing to put in, year out. I think that's what kind of makes it amazing. It's the longevity of the whole thing.
That's right. And I think that's what interests me the most. I mean, the streak, which I talk about in the intro, is one thing, but the team's been wildly successful since. I think you're still running over the course of the time still at about 93% win rate. It's quite amazing. How do you avoid then people maybe making a comparison and setting actual standards with a group when they do come in? So how do you manage that, knowing the highest of highs that you've seen over 36 years with the current crop, and how do you keep coming back to what the present moment's going to hold for this team?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I think that's what experience, we have a coaching staff. We've all been together. I think the coach that's, the last coach, I mean, I guess we have one coach that's been with us only 5 years. Most everybody else has been with us for 10 years or longer. So we've got it, to a point where I think that especially a lot of our coaches have been around high school kids a long time. So we have a pretty good feel about, what abilities of teenagers are and what they can accomplish and what they can do. And, they're not going to be able to, pull the wool over our eyes or act like, no. I mean, we have a kind of a system and a program that's worked. So, and the kids that are, same age, same athletic ability, have been able to do it in the past. So we kind of have an idea, what they're capable of. And so with our experience and our knowledge, the kids understand that they're not going to be able to fool us. And we're not trying, it's just, I think when you step on a De La Salle campus, there's just an expectation of what's expected of you as a community member here at this school and as an athlete. And that's kind of an inherent advantage for us. The kids kind of come in knowing, the program's reputation, everyone knows how hard our kids work. So you're not going to come to De La Salle going like, well, I'm not going to do it, the weightlifting in the off season. That you just wouldn't come here. You know what I'm saying? Everyone understands like, well, if I'm going to De La Salle, it's going to be hard work and it's not going to be easy.
One of the books that I read on the school and on the program that you had was called Chasing Perfection. I don't know if you remember that book or remember writing it.
Yeah, with Neil. Yeah, that was the last one Neil Hayes did. Yeah.
Yeah. And in there's a quote that you had about feedback, and you said that at the core of your philosophy is direct feedback and being honest with players about their talents, what they're capable of, and what their potential is. Now, that ability to provide feedback that's so constructive and promotes progress over anything else, I think is a skill that everyone in businesses, other sporting teams, and anywhere you're trying to set a culture would do well to learn and develop. How do you approach feedback like that in a practical sense?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think and we've had players play in the professional ranks, obviously, and in college and all that, and it's really interesting to me, and a lot of the kids notice, for them how their coaches don't communicate with them, and they really see that as they get older, and they've gone through our program, and they're like, I never know what's, at least here I always knew where I stood. That's what kids always say, and that's not always the case. And so on a practical level, we're giving feedback every day at lunch. Their lunch, they have like a half hour for lunch. We're in my classroom going over the day before the practice. And we're constantly giving them feedback of, what they did well, what they didn't do well. So there's the group feedback we give. And then I think if you're going to effectively have any team, whether it's De La Salle or like you mentioned, GM, a corporation or anything, there has to be personal feedback to individuals. If you don't feel they're playing up to standards, I think, to pull people aside and talk to them. We have a lot of one-on-one conversations with our athletes. And then at times, we talk to them as a group at our team dinners on Thursday night and assess where we are as a team. But I think the best way to give feedback to a young man is to kind of sit him down one-on-one and talk to him about what he's doing well, what he's not doing well, or maybe in practice, pull him aside, and discuss things in that way. I think that's always, face-to-face, one-on-one, talking to kids and giving them, not only telling what they're doing wrong, but giving them props. I think that goes a long ways in developing your team and getting everybody on board to your goals. And that takes time, it takes effort. And to do it consistently through a 15, 16-week season, it takes effort to do that. But in the end, it's really worth it.
And you mentioned their group feedback as well. So you're used to giving feedback to I suppose two individuals, but through the group. And I think that's something that's worth looking at, because in so many situations we do feedback behind closed doors. We try and hide away from the fact that we are talking to everyone at once and individuals, and it's okay to actually give feedback in front of a group if it's done the right way.
Absolutely. I think that's important to do that. And I'm not talking about humiliating or embarrassing kids, but to be honest about, because it's important that kids understand that when they're with the group and the importance that everybody has to a team. So we always say you're only as strong, the strength of a team, if you look at it as links, you're only as strong as your weakest link, so that everyone has a part in this link. And if there's a break in the chain, the link or the team, it falls apart. So understanding their responsibility to their teammates. And I'm not talking about just playing football too. I'm talking about their behavior in class and what they're doing in the community, and the understanding that if they screw up in class or they get detention, or that's what we call it here, and they get in trouble and they have to sit, that's going to affect their teammates, and their understanding of their responsibility to their community, not only at school here, but their teammates as well. That's a big part of responsibility and accountability that we call them life lessons. That it's real important. It's one of the biggest things that our players not only take from this program, but they always talk about it as they move on in life, how important that is for them.
Yeah, and I think responsibility is one that people they get confused about, especially as they get older and and the world sort of gets more complex. But a lot of people get goofed up when they think about responsibility on a team in particular. Some people, especially leaders, get threatened by it, some of them. Like they think, if I hand over the keys and give you all responsibility, everything's going to go to hell. Some people think that I'll give you the responsibility, and the response by the people on the team is, well, you've sort of given up caring. So there's this balance that needs to be struck. And I think with a culture that you've got at your school, not just in the football program, but across the school, I think there's lessons in there for us to look at. And I think that I'd be interested to know, how do you actually manage responsibility, and how do you guys talk about that to the players? And is it something that comes through the culture? Is it something that you actively still have to push?
Oh, that's a constant, and we've always talked to our players, and we've constantly remind them that the strength of a De La Salle team never comes through from the coaching staff. The strength of every team always comes from the peer interaction and how willing the captains and we always kind of refer back to our seniors as the leader. Seniors being the oldest guys on the team, as the leaders of the group. And if they're willing to put up with their teammates' lack of effort, we always talk to them about, first of all, being a leader. It doesn't have to be a verbal leadership, but at least you have to lead the team as the oldest of the team through your examples. I mean, that to us is critical. And we tell them, if we have to do all the prodding and the pushing on the team, and kids are only going to respond if we're just harangue them, it's like it's not going to work. The team only works, and our success only works when the kids are willing to work with each other, push each other, bring each other up when the kid's down, but at the same time, not let kids slack off. If they're not willing to challenge each other, for us, that the team never has the success that we'd like it to have. And the kids most of the time, the kids understand that, and they respond to that challenge. If you were to be around us, you could see that there's a lot of the kids are kind of leading they lead the stretch. It's not the coaches always on them. They're really good at kind of leading each other. That's always been the success of our program. You have to be willing as a coach to understand that you're only going to be as good and as strong as your leadership and what you allow and let those kids lead each other. If you're one of those guys that always wants to be the credit and be the guy that did everything, then it just doesn't work in our system. I constantly, especially during games, I'm talking the defense, which I coach. It's like, well, if what I'm calling's not working, I was like, okay, what do you want to run? What's going to work? This is your game. This is your team. What do you want to do here? So I think it's important to be able to do that. You have to give the leadership and up, because if I have to do all of it, we're not going to have the season we want. It's never and by that I mean not just record, just the accountability you want to bring out with your players and what they're going to learn about that. It just doesn't work if we have to do all of it. Teenagers learn best from each other. That's really our basic philosophy.
Yeah, and I think that's the next thing I think that comes up for me as we talk about this is there must be a lot of vulnerability in that. And the thing is, if you can uncrack vulnerability on a team, then I think that just opens the door to so many things like trust and commitment and so many other things
you hit the nail right on the head there. That I think that's a good word that a lot of people I don't think would associate in our country with football players. But I think that's a great word to use for the strength of our program. If you were around our kids a lot, you would say, these kids are a lot more vulnerable than most kids in high school and with each other. And that's really been a strength of our program. That's a good way of saying it.
So is there a way that you can describe how you get to that? Is it a conscious thing? Do you just seem to find that the kids that come fit that culture so well that that's just the way there is and there's a strain of people like that? How do you promote it? It's sort of like the magic formula, if you like, and if you could bottle it, it'd be great. And you guys have gone a long way to that.
Yeah, the kids call it, the word they use here is the brotherhood, and that's something that's built in the 4 years. So first of all, it's got to be a culture in the school as well. So we're a Catholic school, and the kids take religious studies, so we do a lot of different things with the kids. They about working with them on that concept of vulnerability and love and service to those who are less fortunate. So kind of widen their perspective of the world and be more compassionate and be more empathetic. So that's a big part of our school culture. So it kind of starts there. And then, with the team, they'll do exercises like the linemen in the summer. I guarantee you most high schools don't do this, where they do a lineman seminar where they get together in a room and they kind of talk about each individual kid, let them speak about what they feel their strengths and weaknesses are as a lineman. And then, then the other linemen chime in, about what they like about them, what they'd like to see them improve. And so we're kind of working with the kids, and then with the feedback there, then at team dinners, they do commitment cards, which, where they're talking about their goals for the team and the game and for practice the following week. And the kids were they talk to each other about how they're doing with that. So there's a lot of honesty going around where kids are talking to one another. And so that's really rare, for at least as for American football, to have kids do that. But I think that's always been the strength of our program. And I think the fact that we're at De La Salle, and the kind of culture we've developed here with that really helps. It makes a big difference. Two of our coaches are, religious studies. I got my master's in theology, and Coach Lattiser, took a lot of classes in theology. So that's that ability to be able to speak that way, and to throw out the word love amongst each other, and that ability to be vulnerable. I mean, that's a big part of who we are.
Yeah, I think so. And I think then you said that it's rare in football program. I think it's rare nearly everywhere. And it's a real shame because, that if we could get past that, so many things like we've just heard you say open up, and the results of that and what happens as a byproduct of that is everything that people really strive for. There's got to be something that happens in the mind of someone to be able to say, well, I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to say the word love, or I'm going to share that weakness or that vulnerability. Have you got any insight after seeing it for so long? I mean, these rituals that you talked about, you've been doing for years. Is there a time or something that has to happen in order to get the ball rolling, or does everyone just rock up and it just seems to flow at your program?
No, there's no doubt about it that it's got to come through to me, at least my experience, the seniors, the older kids, it's got to start with them, and then they bring the younger kids along, and if they model that for our kids, then it's just a continuum that comes every year, and every once in a while we get a group that really doesn't get it. When we do that, then we really spend the off season talking to the younger kids about, it's interesting. Like a couple years ago, we didn't really have a team that did a really good job of that. And it was interesting is how the younger kids, they didn't say anything during the year because they just didn't feel it was their place. But as soon as the season ended, it was like things are going to be different this year. So we're really fortunate that even if it's not happening, the younger kids can recognize that and realize that's not the way they want to go. So we're pretty fortunate in that we have a system in place that allows kids that to see that and know what it's like a good team versus, the younger kids sense like, these seniors they're just not good leaders, and we're going to be different. And they actually, the next year they'll come to us and say like, yeah, those guys, they weren't good leaders. It's going to be different this year. And it's amazing. I'll tell you one thing, in my 36 years, I could probably count on one hand how many teams have had bad leadership. But I think the most interesting is we've never had it 2 years in a row in my 36 years.
Wow.
So I've been pretty fortunate with that.
Yeah, well, I think that's testament to the work and what you guys do. We look at it and we sort of say, in order to be vulnerable like that, it's got to be a pretty safe place that you guys create. It's got to be incredibly, people must feel incredibly secure in that, even just in terms of what that encapsulates, that word, the brotherhood. For the listeners that don't know what that's like or what that brotherhood really means, are you able to sort of maybe try, it must be so hard with words to try and encapsulate what that brotherhood actually means to the players?
Well, I think, especially in the football program, to keep it quite simply, it's that your willingness, especially in today's society of of Instagram and Facebook and the 10,000 other things these kids have, where it's look at me. It's a willingness to say, and that's been a strength of our program too, is that it's not about me, it's about the guy next to me, and the willingness to sacrifice the individual for the team goals. And that's a hard thing to do with teenagers because their world is look at me. But we've been pretty successful of getting the kids to understand the real beauty of giving yourself up for your teammates and the importance of that. And that's what, and that develops that brotherhood. And the reason why you would do that, it comes to where, like I said, it's pretty simple. It's the love of your teammates. And you'll do that because how much you care about them and how much you respect them and how much you love them. And if To do that with high school boys, I admit it's not easy to do, but we've been pretty successful in doing that, and that's why I think our program has endured and lasted as long as it has.
For sure, and I think then you talk about the rituals that you guys have too. I mean, you do chapel service, player dinners, commitment cards, all that stuff, and there's a ritual in movies like when the game stands tall, you guys walk out on the field linked arms, holding hands. I mean,
right.
How important are those rituals to you guys, and is there one that you think of that probably stands out more than others, or something that you really know is sort of like the litmus test for the team in terms of where we're at as a group?
I see if you talk to the players, they'd probably say like, which one do you think you could do without? They'd probably go, none of them. We have to do all of them. So I think the thing that probably links us probably best together is the dinners the night before the game, because that's where, we do the weeks before commitment, but it's all tied into the same thing. I mean, it goes chapel service, practice, and then dinner where they have a good time with each other, and then it's commitment cards and then team dinner. So I think that's the one, where I think the one that they just feel like we have to do this. I mean,
yeah.
I think that's the time where we're really together as a team, where we're sharing with each other, we're speaking from our hearts. That's the time where, if a kid is messed up, that's the time he'll stand up and apologize to his teammates. That's the time where kids may talk about their disappointment of themselves and how the season is going and how they may feel they let people down. They're not going to do that anymore. That's where, some of the probably the highlights as a coach, where kids have really come honest and have shared themselves. Probably the most poignant and heartfelt times have happened during those times. So that's the moment where those team dinners, I can't imagine us not doing those.
Right. Well, it sounds like, though, that, as you said, you couldn't just say, if anyone's listening and thinks, well, that's the secret, we're going to go out and do team dinners together. As you said, it sounds like, though, it's a lead up and it's part of something else. You wouldn't have those sort of team dinners if you didn't have the other rituals, if you didn't put in the work around it. It's not something that you can just plug and play and say, right, now we're a team because we've had a dinner. And so many businesses do that. What's the first thing they think of? Let's go out for a meal, let's go have a drink together, and let's become a better team.
No, it's really the day-to-day. We call it the grind, and it really is. It's and that's the whole thing. I think there's a mutual respect. I mean, as the coaches, we hold each other accountable as well. I mean, I think that's the most important thing. We understand what the kids, how much time and effort they put in, and the coaches, we work with each other, and we hold each other accountable. If we think someone is slacking off or not giving the best effort to the kids, we'll say something. We're not afraid to be honest with ourselves either. I mean, you said how the coaches, what would they say about you? That's the one thing they'd say. I'm the one who, is the honest one of the group. If something isn't going, I'm the one who's going to say something. So, it's something that's a part of, it's not just like we're doing it with the kids, we're doing it with each other as well. And that, we've had kids come back and say, I miss the honesty. About that. Or like, can you be around me right now? I need some honest feedback. You have kids that are screwing around in college. I need you guys around me more often to get me going. It's kind of funny, but it's interesting how, important the kids feel that really is. Because when you're honest with them, even if it's something they don't want to hear about themselves, what they're really telling them is that I care about you, and I care about you enough that I want you to be better, a better person, a better player.
That's right. And I think that always resonates, no matter what age the person is, no matter what the role is. I think that's what makes it work. So, Terry, again, I know your time's pressed, and we do appreciate you coming on. Maybe one final question before we wrap this up and do the top 10. Over the time that you've had, the generations that you've seen go, there's a lot of misconceptions about millennials and the type of people that they are. But in your experience, how different are kids over the generations, and maybe what you've seen and this current generation? Just a comment on that.
Well, the only thing I would say, people, we actually get that question all the time, or, how are they different? And in my experience is that there are just more distractions for them out there, and more ways with social media for them to, what we say, say the wrong thing, or, post the wrong thing. I just think there's just so much. It's just so more. There's so much more out there for them to end up, doing something inappropriate and all that. So there's just more distractions for them out there that we work with them all the time and discuss with them. And we're on their Twitter feeds, and we don't check their phones every day, but. The other thing is with the school, we kind of have built a reputation of, a certain behavior. So when kids are doing things they're maybe not supposed to be or doing, people know that we're going to take that seriously. So our kids don't get away with anything because everyone's kind of knows that we're not just going to go, oh, he's a starter, we need him, we're not going to do anything. They know that first and foremost we're educators. So the kids have eyes on them all the time. So there hasn't been a lot of shift, I think, in how the kids work and their work ethic. It's the same. We've been fortunate with that. Like I said, I just think at times they just have more chances to be distracted and do dumb things on social media. But outside of that, it's not like. And our parents as well, they've pretty much bought into the system and follow along what we need them to do.
Yeah, for sure.
We're not like, we can't get them to show up anymore on time, or they won't come to the weight room. That just doesn't happen with us.
No, well, you've got that culture, you've got that accountability, and they've made that commitment. I mean, you've put all those things in place for a reason, and that's, I think, testament to the fact that it does work. It's not the people, it's the environment that they're in.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, Terry. Well, let's wrap it up then. But before we do the Barnraisers top 10, so I don't know if you've had a chance to check these out, but if I fire 10 quick questions at you, you think you could come up with some answers?
Of course.
All right, let's do it. Question 1. What's one thing you feel must be present or created for a team to succeed?
Accountability.
Number 2, what is one thing you feel must be avoided or overcome in order for a team to succeed?
Oh, it's easy. Selfishness.
Question 3, what team, current or historic, would you love to have been a member of?
Oh, that's a good one. Oh yeah, well, I would have to say the 1998 Spartans. They're one of my favorite teams of all time.
Awesome. Okay, who is an ultimate team player in your eyes and why?
Just in the society right now?
Anywhere you like.
Oh, I think Steph Curry is for the Golden State Warriors because, Kevin Durant came, he could have moped. And it was interesting because when he was drafted, Monte Ellis, who was the Warriors guard, said, I can't play with this guy. And, of course, the Warriors shipped him off to Milwaukee. But, Kevin Durant showed up and Steph Curry kind of stepped aside for the good of the team. I thought that showed great humility on his part.
Okay, number 5. What 3 qualities make someone a great teammate or colleague?
Compassionate, empathetic, and hardworking.
Okay, number 6. What 3 qualities make someone a great coach or manager?
Okay, I don't think you can talk in negatives, but I'm trying to think. First of all, to be a great coach, number 1, you cannot have an ego.
Yep.
Got to work well with others, and you got to be a good communicator.
Okay, so if we said selfless, collaborative, and a good communicator.
There you go. See? You're like my wife. She's an English major. She always helps me out with my papers. That's perfect. Yeah.
Cool. We'll run with that. Number 7. What's one thing that instantly makes you feel part of a team?
I think a passion for me. It's a passion for the game and each other. That's the number one thing for me.
Number 8, what's one thing that instantly makes you feel excluded from a team?
Ooh, that's a good one. When do I feel excluded from a team? I just, when you have a team that only, that's not selfless and they're selfish and they only care about themselves. I mean, that to me is, and I've never, the interesting thing is when you say that, I wish I said that's a good question because I've actually never experienced that. So I wouldn't know what that was like, but I would have to say the day I would feel excluded is when, our kids and our team were just, just about themselves, but I just can't imagine being in that situation.
Number 9, what is your fondest team memory?
I think there's no doubt about it. My fondest team memory was I remember watching those games. Winning, I guess beating Long Beach Poly at Long Beach Poly during the winning streak, because the effort put by our kids that game was just extraordinary. And my nephew was on that team, so to be able to share that with him as, my brother's child and to be out there. But you just had to be there and to see that. It was the most extraordinary athletic effort by teenage kids I think you're ever going to find. It was just incredible, an unbelievable experience that I'll never forget.
Oh, that's sensational. And what year was that particular game you're talking about?
The Poly game was 2001.
2001. All right. I might have a look on YouTube and see if I can put some highlights in the show notes just to put it in there for people that might be interested.
That was when the game stands tall. They played around with how the game went, but it was when that guy was playing against that really big guy, that Buster guy and stuff. And
yeah,
that team. Yeah, I mean we haven't looked, but just off the top of my head, there was 6 guys between us and them that I know for sure played professional football. I think there's more on that roster. Wow. I've never really looked back at that roster. It's an incredible game. And athletic ability out there is incredible.
Oh, fantastic. And the last question we've got, Terry, is what's one thing you'd like to hear a fellow coach, manager, boss, or teammate say about you?
He was always honest.
He was always honest. I love it. Well, Terry, that's the end of the top 10. You've been brilliant at that. I could probably go another hour asking you questions on top of that, but I know we don't have the time today. I'd love to maybe catch up with you another time and we can talk some more about teams. For now, I think you've got somewhere you need to run. So I really want to thank you for today and for everything that you've given us as part of the show.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, that's it. I don't know about you, but the amount of humility and authenticity that Terry brings to that conversation is simply outstanding. For a guy that's lauded as being one of the best football coaches on the planet, he clearly believes in the team-first culture that he's helped create, and he possesses a selflessness that is simply beyond most other people. So thanks again, Terry. It was truly a pleasure and an honour to have you on the show. All right, if you want to learn more about the Spartans and the culture that they've put together, then be sure to check out the show notes. I've included links to the books that we talked about in the show, as well as a link to the movie, which is available on iTunes and I think Netflix as well, although you'll have to check that out. Also, please remember to let me know what you thought of the show or the podcast in general. I'm also interested in any special guest ideas or topics that you would like covered. To do this, you can email me, dan@shiftingpeers.com, or you can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. The handle to search for is @BarnraisersPod. Of course, I'd also appreciate it if you could just take a couple of minutes and leave us a review on iTunes. I could really do with your help in that area. So if you think the show deserves to grow and be heard, then please jump on and share your thoughts. I think that's just about it for now. I've been Dan Stones, this has been Barnraisers, and until we get together again, remember, luck is never the reason. Too hard is not an excuse, and nothing is impossible. Bye for now.